What would you do if you were just 19 years old, divorced with a baby, and your own parents threw you out on the street with nothing but the clothes on your back? Would you trust a complete stranger, an 82-year-old woman everyone warned you was crazy? That's exactly what one desperate teenage mother did when she had nowhere else to turn. But what she discovered hidden in the elderly woman's mansion wasn't just shelter and kindness. It was a secret so explosive that some of the most powerful people in the country would do anything to keep it buried. What happened next would not only save her life, but expose a conspiracy that changed American history forever. Before we dive into this incredible true story, let us know where you're watching from. Sierra Valdez was only 19 years old, but she'd already lived through more heartbreak than most people experience in a lifetime. The fluorescent lights of the gas station bathroom flickered as she changed her 8-month-old daughter Bella's diaper on the plastic changing table, trying not to cry. It had been 3 days since her parents had given her an ultimatum that still echoed in her mind. "Choose him or choose us," her father had said, his voice cold and final. When Sierra refused to go back to her ex-husband, Marcus, the man who'd left bruises hidden beneath her clothes, her parents had packed her belongings into 2 garbage bags and locked the door behind her. Marcus had seemed perfect when they'd met at her high school graduation party. Charming, older at 24 with a good job at his uncle's construction company. Her parents had pushed for the wedding when she got pregnant at 18, saying it was the right thing to do. They couldn't see past his polite smile and steady paycheck. To the controlling temper that emerged after the honeymoon, the divorce had been final for just 2 weeks. Sierra had thought her parents would be relieved when she finally left Marcus, but instead they were furious. In their traditional household, divorce was a shameful failure, especially for a teenage mother. They'd chosen their reputation in the community over their own daughter. Now Sierra had $47 to her name, no job prospects, and a baby who needed formula and diapers. She'd spent the last 2 nights sleeping in her beat-up Honda Civic, parking in different locations to avoid police attention. The car, at least, was in her name, the only thing she'd managed to keep from the marriage. That morning, she'd used the last of her gas to drive to Millbrook, a small town about an hour from where she'd grown up. She'd heard they had a women's shelter, but when she'd arrived, they were full. The kind woman at the desk had given her a voucher for 1 meal at the local diner and apologized for not being able to do more. As Sierra finished changing Bella and washed her hands in the dingy sink, she caught sight of herself in the mirror. Her long black hair was greasy, pulled back in a messy ponytail. Dark circles shadowed her brown eyes. She looked nothing like the bright-eyed girl who'd been valedictorian of her class just over a year ago, the girl who'd planned to study social work in college. "It's going to be okay, baby," she whispered to Bella, who gurgled happily, unaware of their desperate situation. "Mommy's going to figure something out." But even as she said the words, Sierra had no idea how she would keep that promise. The diner was nearly empty when Sierra walked in, holding Bella close to her chest. The smell of coffee and bacon made her stomach growl painfully. She hadn't eaten anything but crackers from a gas station in 2 days, saving every penny for Bella's formula. "Just water, please," she told the waitress, a middle-aged woman with tired eyes who glanced at the meal voucher Sierra placed on the table. "Honey, that voucher covers a full meal," the waitress said gently. "You should eat something." Sierra's cheeks burned with shame, but hunger won. She ordered the cheapest sandwich on the menu and a glass of milk. As she ate slowly, savoring each bite, Bella began to fuss. The last bottle of formula was in the diaper bag, but Sierra knew it would be gone by nightfall. The bell above the door chimed, and an elderly woman entered, moving carefully with an ornate wooden cane. She was elegantly dressed in a purple wool coat, her silver hair pinned in a neat bun. Despite her age, her blue eyes were sharp and alert as they swept across the diner. The woman chose the booth directly across from Sierra, and their eyes met for a moment. Sierra looked away quickly, bouncing Bella to quiet her cries. "Beautiful baby," the elderly woman commented, her voice cultured but warm. "How old?" 8 months, Sierra replied quietly, not wanting to encourage conversation. She'd learned to be wary of strangers, especially after everything that had happened. The woman ordered tea and soup, then surprised Sierra by asking the waitress to bring a bowl of warm water. When it arrived, she pulled out a small packet from her purse and mixed powder into the water, creating what looked like baby formula. "Goat's milk formula," she explained, noticing Sierra's stare. "I keep it for emergencies. My great-niece has allergies. May I?" Sierra hesitated, but Bella was crying harder now, attracting annoyed looks from the cook. Pride warred with desperation, and desperation won. She nodded, and the woman passed over the bottle. As Bella drank eagerly, the woman studied Sierra with those penetrating blue eyes. "When did you last sleep in a real bed, dear?" The question was so direct, so knowing, that tears welled up in Sierra's eyes. "I'm fine," she managed. "No," the woman said firmly. "You're not. And that's perfectly all right. Sometimes we all need help." She paused, seeming to make a decision. "My name is Eleanor Hartley. I live in the old Victorian mansion on Elm Street. The blue one with the tower." Sierra had noticed the house earlier. It was impossible to miss, standing like something from a fairy tale among the modest townhomes. "I'm Sierra," she offered reluctantly. "This is Bella." Eleanor smiled, and for the first time in days, Sierra felt a tiny spark of hope. "I have a proposition for you," Eleanor said, stirring her tea with deliberate calm. "I need a live-in caretaker, someone to help with daily tasks, cooking, light cleaning. In exchange, you'd have room and board, plus a modest salary." Sierra's heart leaped, then immediately plummeted. It sounded too good to be true, and in her experience, things that seemed too good to be true usually were. "Why me?" she asked suspiciously. "You don't even know me." Eleanor's smile was sad, but knowing. "My dear, I've lived in this town for 60 years. I've seen enough young women in trouble to recognize the signs. That voucher tells me you've been to the shelter. Your car in the parking lot is packed with belongings. And unless I miss my guess, those bruises on your wrist aren't from clumsiness." Sierra instinctively pulled down her sleeve, covering the fading yellow marks Marcus had left during their last argument. "I can provide references," Eleanor continued. "Ask anyone in town about Eleanor Hartley. Call Pastor Williams at First Methodist, or Dr. Patel at the clinic. I'm not some crazy old woman luring you into danger." "People have been warning me about you," Sierra admitted, remembering the shelter worker's whispered comment about the eccentric Hartley woman. Eleanor laughed, a rich sound that filled the small diner. "Oh, I'm sure they have. I've been fighting City Hall for years about their development plans. I support progressive candidates. I took in draft dodgers during Vietnam. In a small town like this, that makes me dangerous." Her eyes twinkled. "But not to you." Sierra wanted to say yes immediately. but life had taught her to be cautious. "Can I think about it?" "Of course. But where will you sleep tonight while you're thinking?" The question hit home. Sierra glanced out the window at her car, imagining another night trying to keep Bella warm with just blankets, constantly afraid of being told to move along, or worse. "I don't want charity," Sierra said, her voice barely above a whisper. "This isn't charity," Eleanor replied firmly. "I'm 82 years old. My children live across the country and want me in a nursing home. I need help to maintain my independence. You need a safe place for your daughter. It's a business arrangement." The waitress returned with the check, and Eleanor paid for both meals despite Sierra's protests. As they prepared to leave, Eleanor handed Sierra a business card with her address and phone number. "The offer stands," she said. "Day or night, that door will open for you." Standing in the parking lot, holding Bella and watching Eleanor's town car disappear down Main Street, Sierra faced the biggest decision of her young life. Trust a stranger, or face another night in the car with winter approaching and her baby to protect. She looked down at Bella, who was contentedly full for the first time in days, thanks to Eleanor's formula. Sometimes, Sierra thought, you have to take a leap of faith. 20 minutes later, she was knocking on the door of the blue Victorian mansion. The Victorian mansion was even more imposing up close. 3 stories of Queen Anne architecture rose before Sierra, complete with a circular tower, wraparound porch, and elaborate gingerbread trim. Paint peeled in places, and the garden was overgrown, but the bones of the house were magnificent. Eleanor answered the door herself, having changed into a comfortable cardigan and house slippers. "I'm so glad you came," she said simply, ushering them inside. The interior took Sierra's breath away. Dark wood paneling gleamed in the lamplight, and oriental rugs covered polished hardwood floors. The walls were lined with built-in bookshelves, stretching to the ceiling, filled with leather-bound volumes. But there was also a layer of dust on everything, and several rooms were closed off, sheets covering the furniture like ghosts. "It's too much house for one person," Eleanor admitted, leading them up a grand staircase. "My husband Charles and I raised our 3 children here, plus our adopted son. Now it's just me and too many memories." She showed Sierra to a suite on the 2nd floor, a bedroom with an attached sitting room and private bathroom. The furniture was antique but well maintained, and someone had recently cleaned. A crib stood in the corner, already made up with fresh linens. "I had my neighbor's son bring it down from the attic this afternoon," Eleanor explained, noticing Sierra's surprise. "I keep several up there. This house has sheltered many families over the years. I was hoping you'd come." Sierra set Bella down in the crib, and the baby immediately grabbed the soft toys placed there. "Mrs. Hartley, Eleanor, please. And before you protest again, let me show you the kitchen. We need to discuss your duties." The kitchen was a mix of original fixtures and modern appliances, clearly updated with care to preserve the historical character. Eleanor explained that she needed help with meal preparation, grocery shopping, light housekeeping, and managing her medications. "I have a woman who comes twice a week for deep cleaning," Eleanor said. "But daily life has become challenging. My arthritis is worse in the mornings, and my doctor says I shouldn't be climbing stairs alone anymore." As they talked, Sierra began to relax. Eleanor's needs were real, not fabricated. The work was something she could handle, even with Bella. "During the Depression, we took in families," Eleanor explained when Sierra asked about the multiple cribs. During the war, refugees. In the 60s and 70s, young women who found themselves in trouble, as they used to say. She looked directly at Sierra. "You're not the first person to need a safe haven, my dear. You won't be the last." That night, as Sierra lay in a real bed for the first time in days, Bella sleeping peacefully nearby, she wondered what other secrets this old house might hold. The first week passed in a blur of adjustment. Sierra threw herself into the work, determined to prove Eleanor hadn't made a mistake. She cooked simple but nutritious meals, kept the main living areas clean, and helped Eleanor with her daily routines. Bella, meanwhile, seemed to bloom in the stable environment, crawling everywhere and babbling constantly. "You're doing too much," Eleanor observed on the 8th day, finding Sierra scrubbing the kitchen floor while Bella napped. "This isn't a Victorian workhouse, dear. Sit, have tea with me." They developed a routine of afternoon tea in the conservatory, a glass-enclosed room overlooking the wild back garden. It was during these talks that Sierra began to understand just how remarkable Eleanor Hartley was. "My husband was a federal judge," Eleanor explained one day, showing Sierra a yellowed photograph of a distinguished black man in robes. "Charles Washington Hartley, one of the first black federal judges in our state. The crosses burned on our lawn more than once, but Charles never backed down." Sierra studied the photo, surprised. She hadn't realized Eleanor was white when she'd first seen the mixed-race children in other family photos. That must have been incredibly difficult. "Love usually is," Eleanor said simply, "but worth it. Always worth it." As the days passed, Sierra noticed oddities about the house. Certain rooms Eleanor kept locked, claiming they were unsafe. Mail arrived addressed to various organizations Sierra had never heard of. And sometimes, late at night, the phone would ring with Eleanor speaking in hushed, urgent tones. One morning, while dusting the library, Sierra discovered a section of books about civil rights law, investigative journalism, and something called the COINTELPRO files. Many had handwritten notes in the margins. A folder fell from between two books, spilling photographs across the floor. Sierra knelt to gather them and froze. The photos showed civil rights marches, protest scenes, and meetings. In many of them, a younger Eleanor appeared alongside figures Sierra recognized from history textbooks, activists, leaders, people who'd shaped America. "Those were dangerous times," Eleanor said from the doorway, making Sierra jump. She didn't seem angry, just thoughtful. "We documented everything. You never knew what might become important later. You were part of the movement. We all were in our way. Charles through the law, me through other channels." Eleanor moved carefully to her favorite chair. "I helped run safe houses, coordinate legal support, document police brutality. The FBI had quite a file on me." Sierra helped Eleanor settle, mind racing with questions. But before she could ask them, the doorbell rang. Through the window, she could see a black sedan parked outside, two men in suits standing at the door. "Don't answer that," Eleanor said sharply, all warmth gone from her voice. "Take Bella upstairs, now." The urgency in her tone sent Sierra running for the stairs, scooping up Bella from her playpen. As she reached the landing, she heard Eleanor. "On the phone? They're here. Yes, at the house. Send someone immediately." Whatever secrets this house held, Sierra realized, they were still very much alive. From the upstairs window, Sierra watched the men in suits eventually leave after Eleanor refused to open the door. Within minutes, a police car arrived, followed by a man Eleanor introduced as her lawyer, James Chen. a sharp-dressed Asian-American man in his 50s. "False alarm," Eleanor said when Sierra came back downstairs, but her hands trembled as she poured tea. Old paranoia, perhaps. That night, Sierra couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about Eleanor's reaction. The FBI files mentioned the locked rooms. Around midnight, she heard movement downstairs. Worried Eleanor might have fallen, she crept down to check. She found Eleanor in the library with James Chen and two other people, a black woman in her 60s and a younger white man with a camera. They were examining documents spread across the large oak table. "The statute of limitations has run out on most of it," James was saying. "But if we can prove the cover-up continued..." Eleanor noticed Sierra in the doorway. Instead of anger, her expression showed resignation. "I suppose it's time you knew. Come in, dear. Close the door behind you." The woman was introduced as Diane Marshall, a journalist, and the man as Tom Bradley, a documentary filmmaker. The documents on the table made Sierra's heart stop. FBI memos, police reports, photographs of a crime scene. 40 years ago, Eleanor began. A young civil rights worker named Jerome Washington was murdered 2 blocks from this house. He was 22, brilliant, had just graduated from Howard Law. He was staying here while organizing voter registration drives. Eleanor pulled out a photograph of a handsome young man with a bright smile. The police said it was a robbery gone wrong, but Jerome had documented evidence of police corruption, vote tampering, and connections between local officials and the KKK. That evidence disappeared the night he died. But it didn't disappear, Diane continued. Eleanor and Charles hid it. They've been protecting it for decades, waiting for the right moment to expose the truth. Why now? Sierra asked. Because the main conspirator just announced he's running for U.S. Senate, Tom said, pulling up a news article on his phone. Robert Garrison, our esteemed former police chief, current congressman. He was a young officer then, part of the cover-up. Eleanor looked at Sierra steadily. Those men today were Garrison's people. Someone leaked that we're preparing to go public. They want the evidence, and they'll do anything to get it. The evidence is hidden in this house, James added. In places only. Eleanor knows, but with her health, you need someone younger to help retrieve it, Sierra finished, understanding dawning. I didn't mean to involve you, Eleanor said, but perhaps fate brought you here for a reason. The question is, are you willing to help us finally get justice? For Jerome. Sierra thought of her own fights for justice. Small as they seemed compared to this, she thought of Bella growing up in a world where powerful men could still destroy lives without consequence. Yes, she said firmly. I'll help. The next morning brought consequences. Sierra woke to find an eviction notice taped to Eleanor's front door. The city suddenly claiming code violations that required immediate evacuation. James Chen arrived within an hour, his expression grim. Garrison's moving fast, he said, scanning. The notice. This is completely bogus, but it'll take time to fight it in court. How much time do we have? Eleanor asked. 72 hours before they can forcibly remove us. As James made phone calls, Sierra noticed a van parked across the street with tinted windows. When she went to get groceries later, it followed her. At the store, a man in a baseball cap seemed to appear wherever she went. Her hands shook as she loaded groceries, memories of Marcus's stalking behavior flooding back. But knowing this was something far more sinister. When she returned home, Eleanor was on the porch with Diane Marshall. They're escalating, Diane said. My editor just got a call from Garrison's lawyers threatening a massive libel suit if we publish anything. That afternoon, Sierra's phone rang, her parents' number. She'd been avoiding their calls, but something made her answer. "Sierra, honey, where are you?" Her mother's voice was strained. "Some men came by asking about you. They said you're mixed up in something dangerous. They said they could help get Bella into protective custody if you cooperate with them." Ice flooded Sierra's veins. "What did you tell them?" "Nothing. But Sierra, if you're in trouble, maybe you should come home. Your father and we've been talking. We were too harsh." "Mom, listen carefully," Sierra interrupted. "Those men are not trying to help. I'm safe, Bella's safe, but I need you to be careful. If they come back, call the police immediately." After hanging up, Sierra found Eleanor in the library, pulling books from shelves to reveal hidden compartments. "They threatened my baby," Sierra said, her voice shaking with rage. Eleanor's expression hardened. "Then we move tonight. No more waiting." She handed Sierra a flashlight. "The main cache is in the basement behind the wine cellar. But first, we need to get Bella somewhere safe." Within an hour, Pastor Williams arrived to take Bella to stay with his family. Sierra kissed her daughter goodbye, her heart breaking but knowing it was necessary. As darkness fell, Eleanor led Sierra to the basement, using a key Sierra had never seen to unlock a heavy door. Behind it, narrow stairs descended into blackness. "Charles, he built this during the height of the civil rights movement," Eleanor explained as they descended. "A panic room, he called it, but it became something more." At the bottom, Eleanor flipped a switch, illuminating a small room lined with filing cabinets. Boxes of documents, photographs, and reel-to-reel tapes filled metal shelves. 40 years of evidence, Eleanor said softly. Not just about Jerome, but about dozens of cases. The real history they tried to bury. A sound from upstairs made them both freeze, the unmistakable sound of breaking glass. Eleanor grabbed Sierra's arm with surprising strength. "The tunnel," she whispered urgently. "Charles planned for this." Behind one of the filing cabinets was a narrow passage. Eleanor pushed Sierra through first, then followed, pulling the cabinet back into place. They crawled through darkness until emerging in the garden shed, where Tom Bradley waited with a van. "Diane's creating a distraction out front," he said, helping Eleanor up. "We have maybe 5 minutes." They loaded 4 boxes of the most crucial evidence before fleeing. Through the rear window, Sierra watched flashlight beams moving through. Eleanor's house. Her sanctuary had been invaded, but this time she wasn't running alone. Tom drove them to an unexpected location, the local community center where dozens of people had gathered. Sierra recognized some faces from around town: the librarian, the diner waitress, Pastor Williams, Dr. Patel, and many others. "We've been preparing for this day," Pastor Williams explained to Sierra's amazement. "Many of us remember Jerome. We've been waiting for Eleanor to give the word." The next hours were a blur of activity. Documents were scanned and uploaded to secure servers. Diane coordinated with journalists across the country. Lawyers prepared injunctions. The community formed a protective network around Eleanor and Sierra. "Garrison underestimated us," Eleanor said with satisfaction. "He thought fear would keep everyone silent, just like in 81. But times have changed." By dawn, the story was breaking on social media. Tom's footage of men breaking into Eleanor's house had gone viral. A Justice for Jerome began trending. Major news outlets picked up the story. Sierra found herself at the center of it all, helping Eleanor navigate interviews and protecting her from the chaos. When someone leaked Sierra's identity as the teenage mom helping expose the conspiracy, public sympathy swung even more strongly their way, but Garrison wasn't finished. Sierra received a call from an unknown number. Marcus's attorney informed her that Marcus had been out on bail and was now willing to testify about her unfitness as a mother. "He's prepared to file for emergency custody," the lawyer said coldly. "Unless you stop this nonsense immediately." Sierra's hands trembled, but Eleanor steadied her. "They're desperate," the older woman said. "This is when they're most dangerous, but also most vulnerable." James Chen worked through the night, and by morning had news. "We've got a federal judge willing to hear emergency motions. The FBI's corruption unit wants to see our evidence. And Sierra," he smiled grimly, "turns out Marcus has been in contact with Garrison's people for weeks. We have phone records. That's witness tampering and conspiracy." The tables were turning, but Sierra knew the hardest part was still ahead. They had to get the evidence before a judge while keeping everyone safe, especially Bella. The final confrontation with Garrison and his network was coming. The federal courthouse in the state capital was surrounded by media when they arrived. Eleanor, despite her age, walked with dignity, Sierra at her side. Tom filmed everything while Diane live tweeted the proceedings. But Garrison had one more card to play. As they approached the courthouse steps, Marcus appeared with two lawyers. Sierra's stomach dropped. He looked different, clean-shaven, wearing a suit, playing the concerned father perfectly. "That's my daughter's mother," he called out to reporters. "She abandoned our child to play politics with a senile old woman. I'm filing for emergency custody today." Cameras swung toward them. Sierra felt the familiar paralysis that Marcus had, always triggered, but Eleanor squeezed her hand. "Stand tall," she whispered. "Truth is your armor." Before Sierra could respond, Pastor Williams emerged from the crowd with Bella in his arms. The baby reached for Sierra, calling, "Mama!" The image of mother and child reuniting was captured by every camera. "This young woman," Pastor Williams announced in his commanding preacher's voice, "has shown more courage in protecting her child and seeking justice than most of us show in a lifetime. I'll testify to that in any court." The crowd of supporters behind him voiced their agreement. Marcus's confident mask slipped as he realized public opinion wasn't on his side. Inside the courthouse, the hearing was intense. Garrison's lawyers tried every trick to suppress the evidence, claiming it was stolen, inadmissible, ancient history. But the federal prosecutor, a young black woman named Angela Davis, no relation to the famous activist, she noted with a smile, systematically destroyed their arguments. When Eleanor took the stand, the courtroom was silent. She spoke of Jerome Washington with such clarity and passion that several people wept. She detailed the cover-up, named names, and presented evidence that showed the conspiracy had continued for decades, with Garrison silencing witnesses and destroying careers. But the most powerful moment came when Sierra testified. She spoke about understanding what it meant to be silenced by powerful men, to have your truth dismissed, to fight for justice against overwhelming odds. "Mr. Garrison sent my ex-husband to threaten me," she said clearly. "Just like his people threatened Jerome Washington's family 40 years ago. The methods haven't changed, only the dates." Garrison's lawyer objected furiously, but the damage was done. The judge ordered all evidence preserved and forwarded to the Justice Department. He also issued a restraining order, preventing Garrison or his associates from coming near Eleanor, Sierra, or their supporters. As they left the courthouse, Marcus tried one last manipulation, grabbing Sierra's arm. "You've ruined everything," he hissed. But Sierra, surrounded by her new family of choice, simply removed his hand. "No," she said firmly. "I've finally built something worth protecting." Federal marshals arrested Marcus minutes later for violating his parole by contacting witnesses in an ongoing federal investigation. The crowd cheered as he was led away in handcuffs. The full scope of the conspiracy exceeded even Eleanor's expectations. FBI investigators, working through the evidence, uncovered a network of corruption spanning 4 decades. Jerome Washington's murder was just one of many crimes covered up by Garrison's network. He wasn't just protecting racist cops, Angela Davis explained at a press conference. He was running a criminal enterprise. Bribes, evidence tampering, witness intimidation, all while climbing the political ladder. The smoking gun came from an unexpected source. Hidden among Jerome's papers was a recording he'd made the night he died, documenting a meeting where Garrison, then a young officer, had taken bribes from local Klan members. Jerome had hidden the tape in Eleanor's house just hours before his death. Diane Marshall's investigation revealed more. Garrison had amassed a fortune through his corruption, hidden in offshore accounts and shell companies. He'd destroyed dozens of lives to keep his secrets, including 3 other civil rights workers, whose deaths had been ruled accidents. But the revelation that shocked Sierra most came from Eleanor herself. One evening, as they sorted through the last boxes of evidence, Eleanor pulled out a photograph of a young mixed-race woman. "My daughter," Eleanor said softly. "Lily. She was Jerome's girlfriend. After he died, she discovered she was pregnant. The stress and grief. She died in childbirth. The baby survived." Sierra's heart stopped. "What happened to the baby?" Eleanor smiled through tears. "Charles and I raised him as our own. Our son, Michael. He's a civil rights lawyer in Chicago now, fighting the same fights his biological father began." "Does he know?" "He does. We told him when he turned 18. He chose to keep it private, to honor both his biological parents and us, but he's the reason I never gave up. Jerome's legacy lives on through him." The connections ran deeper. It turned out that the community center where they'd taken refuge was built on land Jerome had helped purchase for the community. The scholarship fund at the local college bore his name, quietly maintained by Eleanor for decades. His dream of empowering the black community had continued, even if his killers had tried to erase him. When the federal indictments came down, they named 17 co-conspirators, including 3 current police officers, 2 judges, and Garrison himself. The congressman was arrested at his campaign headquarters, cameras capturing his perp walk. Jerome Washington was murdered for trying to ensure every American could vote freely, Angela Davis announced. "Today, we begin to deliver the justice he was denied." Sierra stood with Eleanor, watching the news coverage. The elderly woman seemed to have shed years, her purpose renewed. "You know," Eleanor said, "I think Jerome would have liked you. You have the same fierce spirit." "What happens now?" Sierra asked. Eleanor smiled. "Now, my dear, we rebuild, and we ensure this never happens again." The trial of Robert Garrison became a national sensation. For 6 months, the country watched as the full extent of the conspiracy unfolded. Sierra attended every day, supporting Eleanor as witness after witness testified about the reign of terror Garrison had orchestrated. Marcus, facing his own charges, tried one last time to manipulate the system by offering to testify against Sierra. But his credibility crumbled when prosecutors revealed he'd been paid $50,000 by Garrison's associates to harass Sierra. He eventually pled guilty to witness tampering and conspiracy, receiving a 5-year sentence. The turning point came when Michael Hartley took the stand. Eleanor's adopted son, now knowing the full truth of his parentage, spoke eloquently about growing up in the shadow of his biological father's murder. "My parents, all 4 of them, taught me that justice delayed is not justice denied," he said. "Today, we prove them right." Garrison was convicted on all counts: conspiracy to commit murder, racketeering, obstruction of justice, and witness tampering spanning 4 decades. The judge sentenced him to life without parole. His co-conspirators received sentences ranging from 10 to 40 years. But justice came in other forms too. The city council, shamed by the revelations, voted to rename the street where Jerome died. In his honor, a monument was erected at the spot where he fell, with Sierra and Eleanor unveiling it together. The community center received a federal grant to expand its voting rights education programs. The scholarship fund in Jerome's name was endowed with millions recovered from Garrison's ill-gotten gains. For Sierra personally, vindication was sweet. The family court judge, reviewing all evidence, not only dismissed Marcus's custody claims, but granted Sierra sole custody with supervised visits only. More importantly, he ordered Marcus to pay 3 years of back child support. "You've shown remarkable courage and judgment," the judge told Sierra. "Your daughter is lucky to have you." Eleanor's house, damaged during the break-in, was restored with funds from a GoFundMe that raised over $500,000. People from across the country contributed, moved by the story of the young mother and elderly activist who'd risked everything for justice. At the victory celebration, the community center overflowed with supporters. Eleanor, despite her age, danced with Pastor Williams. Sierra found herself surrounded by job offers from law firms and advocacy groups impressed by her courage. "I never expected this," Sierra told Diane Marshall, who was finishing her book about the case. "I was just trying to survive." "The best heroes usually are," Diane replied. As the evening wound down, Eleanor pulled Sierra aside. "You know, this house is too big for just me. I've been thinking about converting it into transitional housing for young mothers, but I'd need someone to run it, someone who understands what they're going through." Tears filled Sierra's eyes. "Eleanor, Think about it," Eleanor said gently. "You've got time. We both do now." 1 year later, the blue Victorian mansion bore a discreet bronze plaque. Hartley House, a haven for mothers and children, founded in memory of Jerome Washington and Lily Hartley. Sierra stood on the wraparound porch watching as 3 young mothers played with their children in the restored garden. The house that had once sheltered her now provided refuge for others fleeing dangerous situations. "The inspector's here," called Maria, one of the residents. At 17, she was even younger than Sierra had been, but her eyes held the same determination to build a better life for her baby. Sierra had earned her GED and was halfway through a social work degree, studying online while managing Hartley House. The program they'd developed combined housing, childcare, education support, and job training. In its first year, they'd helped 12 young mothers transition to independent living. Eleanor, now 84, had moved to a first-floor suite, but remained actively involved. She taught cooking classes, shared her vast network of contacts, and provided the grandmotherly presence many residents had never experienced. "You've exceeded every expectation," the state inspector said after touring the facility. "Your success rate is remarkable. We're recommending Hartley House as a model for replication statewide." That evening they held their weekly community dinner. The dining room that had once hosted civil rights leaders now buzzed with conversation in English and Spanish, the voices of young women planning their futures. Michael Hartley visited monthly. From Chicago, providing free legal clinics, Dr. Patel offered medical services. Pastor Williams led optional meditation sessions. The community that had rallied to expose Garrison's crimes had transformed into a support network for the next generation. "Mama, look!" Bella, now walking confidently, toddled over with a picture she'd drawn. At nearly 2, she was thriving in the nurturing environment with multiple aunties and playmates. After dinner, Sierra found Eleanor in the conservatory, reading through applications for their expanding program. 23 applications this month, Eleanor mused. We'll need to fundraise for the house next door soon. Sierra sat beside her mentor, friend, and chosen grandmother. "Did you imagine this when you offered me tea that day?" Eleanor smiled. "I hoped. You needed shelter, yes, but you had something more valuable, the courage to fight for justice. That's what this house has always been about. Shelter leads to stability. Stability enables courage, and courage creates change." The doorbell rang, and Sierra went to answer it. A young woman stood there, holding a baby, a garbage bag of possessions at her feet. Her face held the same desperate hope Sierra remembered from her own reflection 2 years ago. I heard you help people like me," the woman said hesitantly. Sierra smiled, opening the door wide. "Yes, we do. Come in. You're safe here. Welcome to Hartley House." As she led the new resident inside, Sierra glanced back at the street where her journey had begun. The girl who'd slept in her car with $47 to her name now ran a program that would help hundreds of young mothers reclaim their lives. Sometimes the most profound transformations begin with a simple act of kindness from a stranger who sees your potential when you can't see it yourself. And sometimes in fighting for justice for others, you discover your own power to change the world. "Where are you watching from today?" Sierra asked her viewers at the end of the documentary Tom had created about their story. And remember, wherever you are, you have the power to be someone's Eleanor Hartley. You just have to open your door.